On the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree. What for? Not for the fruit. The tree that bears the fruit is not the one that was planted. I want the tree that stands in the earth for the first time, with the sun already going down and the water touching its roots, in the earth full of the dead and the clouds passing, one by one, over its leaves. So once more, place. On the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree. What for? Not for the fruit. The tree that bears the fruit is not the one that was planted. I want the tree that stands in the earth for the first time, with the sun already going down and the water touching its roots, in the earth full of the dead and the clouds passing, one by one, over its leaves. So let's take a comfortable seat, feet flat on the floor. Just being here together. Your hands resting comfortably on your lap, face up or face down. And then just straighten the back ever so slightly. Lengthen the neck by a few millimeters. Soften the shoulders. Soften the muscles in your face, relaxing the jaw. If you're okay to close your eyes and even soften the space around your eyes. And taking all the defenses away from the chest, around the heart, softening the belly. This is the tree you're planting on the last day of the world. Imagine that the coils of your body and your thoughts and emotions and perceptions, all the things that you think are true, the scars that life has left on you, fears, desires, and even the store consciousness where you hold all of the stories about yourself. This always happens to me. Imagine a space inside that all of the thoughts settling. Your breath rising in 3 counts. Like water up from the roots, and then falling in 4 counts. Then your breath rising in 4 counts, like water from the roots. And then falling in 5 counts. And then just step back from the tree and witness it all. It's a symbiotic relationship between the branches and the leaves, the bark, little animals that live in it and around it. These thoughts and emotions, scars, impressions, perceptions, and stories about yourself all came from somewhere else. Just letting the breath return. The 3 counts in and 4 counts out. Softening the shoulders, the belly, chest, the muscles of the face. On the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree. What for? Not for the fruit. The tree that bears the fruit is not the one that was planted. I want the tree that stands in the earth for the first time, with the sun already going down, and the water touching its roots, and the earth full of the dead, and the clouds passing, one by one, over its leaves. On Wednesday morning, it was a little rainy, and I was on campus early and walking up the back steps of Battelle Building. And all along the steps were these worms that had come out and found themselves stuck on the concrete. And it wasn't until later, after I had walked around them and gone up to my office, it was not until later that I thought to myself, I didn't save the worms. As a child, and I'm guessing that there's a large contingent in this room right now who did the same. As a child, I was the one bending down to lift the worms up from the sidewalk and put them back in the grass. And there was a moment when that happened less frequently and less frequently and less frequently. When did that stop happening? When did I stop saving the worms? When did I stop planting a tree on the last day of the world? So this poem is a little bit about the end times, but it's mostly about beginner's mind. It's about treating each day and each opportunity with the attitude of a child, the ultimate beginner. And beginners recognize beginners. Children run into each other's arms. So the question today is when did this happen for you? But also, why do this thing for nothing? For really, for no end that we can calculate. So W.S. Merwin, who I've talked about before, is a member of the class of 27. He was born in 1927, along with lots of other well-known American poets like Allen Ginsberg and James Wright and Philip Levine. And what that means is that this whole crew turned 18 when the atom bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. They experienced World War II the way the Lost Generation experienced World War I. They came from a world before that in their education, but right at the moment of their awakening into adulthood, everything shifted. And they were affected by that and had to deal with that for the rest of their lives and their work. James Wright has an incredible poem that I might use in here one of these days called St. Judas, which is about Judas after he's betrayed Christ with his rope going off to kill himself and seeing a man beaten in the road and instinctively dropping the rope and running over to spare his suffering. And the poem is called St. Judas as a way of showing that this is the true saintly act because it really is for nothing. There is no fruit for Judas of this action. Maybe for the world there is, but for Judas, there's nothing that he can do to save himself from damnation. So why do this thing for nothing? So this whole class of 27 found themselves grappling with that issue of why do this thing called art if the world is imminently going to blow up before us? Even William Stafford, who was an older poet than this group, was writing a poem every day, even up to the day that he died. In fact, the last poem that he wrote, Are You Mr. William Stafford, is a magnificent poem, the last day of his life. How much of the service that we do in this world, if stripped away of all incentive and all fruit, so to speak, would we continue doing? If there is something that comes to mind for you, that is the touchstone of a spiritual practice. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be bowling. It could be gardening. It could be taking a walk for no reason whatsoever, but it's the touchstone of spiritual practice. And it's really a great place to begin asking questions. Why bother planting that tree? One more thing about Merwin that I'll say is that he was a proponent of deep ecology, which makes sense given this poem. Deep ecology celebrates the inherent, intrinsic worth of all things, whether they contribute big or small products in nature, and sees nature as an interdependent, interwoven whole organism of which each part has an inherent worth. It's very related to poetry too, which personally to me, I look at things not as having meaning unto themselves, but only in relationship to each other. And it's in the space between the thing that the meaning occurs. It's in the interstice that meaning arises, Mallarmé said. I think about the trees that I plant on the last day of the world. For me, where does that spiritual practice touch down? I spent a lot of time in the last 10 years with friends and family in hospice. I had a friend, Chuck, who called me in the middle of the night once to come and watch Citizen Kane with him, a movie that he'd seen many times. He was dying. Another friend, Fred, who I sat with in hospice watching Duck Soup, Marx Brothers movie. I remember my grandfather drawing a map of Boston from memory from his honeymoon in 1935 in the hospital in the last week of his life. I remember shaving my father's face in the hospice in the last week of his life. I think of Terence DePrez's book, The Survivor, which talks about how in the concentration camps, those folks who survived were the ones who used the coffee, the cold coffee they were given in the morning to actually wash their hands and faces. What is that tree for you? Where have you practiced this very, very deep spiritual practice of planting a tree on the last day of the world? So let's get back into it. Sitting back, hands up on your laps. Feeling the wind and the rustling of the leaves settling in that tree, in that coil that we identify so deeply with ourselves. And I ask you, what would you plant on the last day of the world? What would you begin, even when there was no time left to finish? Yogananda said, the blossom falls away when the fruit appears. And he's talking about a spiritual fruit. but the blossom falls away when the fruit appears. The incentive and the return falls away. Being good, doing good, being seen as good falls away in actions like these. We realize our part in the web of connections. Now that you have that in mind, take a moment to think about something that's happened over the last few days that gave you the feeling of this should not be. Something small, maybe something at work or something in your personal relationships, something you did badly, some injustice that you experienced. Where is that feeling in your body? When you've located, just give it space. And ask yourself, what is the feeling from which that comes? Is it a feeling of not being noticed? A feeling of too many demands on you? A feeling of not being loved? And just name it. As Thich Nhat Hanh would say, nurture it. Say, I'm here for you, dear one. And in that space, use the opportunity to plant a seed in its place. to do something today for no reason, in secret, which no one will know about. Saving a worm, straightening a plant on the road, picking up a small piece of trash. Those seeds are called bijas in Buddhist practice, planting seeds of love. Place by W.S. Merwin. On the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree. What for? Not for the fruit. The tree that bears the fruit is not the one that was planted. I want the tree that stands in the earth for the first time, with the sun already going down and the water touching its roots, in the earth full of the dead, and the clouds passing, one by one, over its leaves.